this leadership skill and how it grows. And I guess I want to ask you a little more about the interpersonal mastery that sits at the intersection between that technical expertise and the people leadership, right? So could you tell us what it really looks like in practice for AEC project managers to do that?
The title project manager means a lot of different things to a lot of different folks. And what we kind of observe or have observed over the years is that the title project manager includes the direct supervision of direct reports.
What if the biggest factor holding back your project success isn't technical knowledge, but behavior? Many AEC project managers are highly skilled on the technical side, yet still struggle with communication, decision-making, or leadership habits that quickly impact outcomes. The challenge isn't a lack of capability, it's a lack of clarity on what behaviors actually drive success. In this episode, I'm joined by Collin George, MBA, managing partner at Talent Matters, LLC, who brings deep expertise in talent development and behavior assessment within the AEC space. We'll talk about the most common behavior gaps that limit project performance. If you're looking to become a more effective project manager, lead stronger teams, and develop better project outcomes, this conversation will give you a practical framework to better understand and improve the behaviors that matter most. Before we jump in, I want to tell you about AEC PM Connect, a series of in-person events we've created at EMI for AEC project managers and the leaders who develop them. If you want to stay on top of PM trends, elevate your team, and deliver stronger project results, these full-day events are built for you. We're coming to New Jersey in June and Kansas City in October. Learn more and register at aecpmconnect.com. Here's a quick word from our AEC PM Connect sponsor, Talent Matters. Talent Matters helps you gain a competitive edge through your people. They understand that an organization rises or falls based on the effectiveness of its leaders and people. Their sole focus is to help you select, develop, and retain high performers. When selecting people, Talent Matters ensures your interviews reveal the right behaviors to support strong hiring decisions. When developing leaders, their skill-based model and process unlock hesitancy and empower leaders to manage with boldness, compassion, and skill. This is your performance advantage. To chat directly with their team, visit talentmatters.net. All right, now it's time for our PM Conversation of the Week with Collin George, MBA. Collin, welcome to the AEC Project Management Podcast.
Thank you, Fiona. It's good to be with you today.
We're so happy to have you. I'm always excited to talk to you. I thought we could start a little bit taking a step back and saying where you are in your career journey today and how your role has evolved as a technical leader and a leader of people.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I've kind of had an interesting career. I guess my professional career began when I commissioned in the Army in 2007. From a technical standpoint, I guess I learned very early in that year how important it was for me to master manual gunnery as it relates to firing projectiles through the air to achieve effects on the battlefield. I was a field artillery officer. And in fact, this is very interesting that we're talking about this, but probably the most challenging course I ever took, including college and even graduate school, was making it through the field artillery officer basic course, just because, especially back in those days, it was all manual. So you used mathematics and charts and tabular firing tables and all sorts of different instruments in order to make the calculations, accounting for all the different variables like wind speed, air temperature, rotation of the earth, all those different things, elevation, in order to make sure that that projectile that you fired would hit your intended target. And so that was definitely a very technical, probably the most technical course I've ever taken. And then from there, my career grew obviously in a very different way, from being a technical leader to being a leader of people. And so I've been on that journey now for almost 20 years, increasing in positional responsibility, moving from a platoon leader to a company commander. And as a reservist in the Army Reserves, I just finished battalion command, which was a very interesting, exciting, and also very challenging experience. So that would maybe kind of just be my experience as it relates going from a technical leader to more of a people leader.
And tell us a little bit about what you do now.
Well, what I do now, we do two things at Talent Matters. We help organizations hire the right people using assessment analytics, incorporating those analytics into their selection and onboarding processes. And we also help organizations stand up leadership programs to help senior leaders and mid-level leaders understand how to effectively lead people.
And around that, you mentioned, this leadership skill and how it grows. And I guess I want to ask you a little more about the interpersonal mastery that sits at the intersection between that technical expertise and the people leadership, right? So could you tell us what it really looks like in practice for AEC project managers to do that?
Absolutely. Maybe just to kind of get the conversation going, I realize that project managers, the title project manager means a lot of different things to a lot of different folks. And I'd actually be curious to get your reactions to this. But we primarily do work with engineers and architects. We have a few construction clients, but it's primarily engineers and architects. And what we kind of observe or have observed over the years is that oftentimes project manager, the title project manager includes the direct supervision of direct reports, but oftentimes it doesn't include direct reports. So in essence, what I'm kind of getting at here is that it kind of varies from firm to firm whether or not project managers have supervisory responsibility of people. And so I'd be curious to get your reaction with firms that y'all work with. What do you typically see in terms of ratios from firm to firm related to whether or not project managers have direct reports or do they not?
I'd say it leans heavily towards they don't actually have direct reports, but they are in charge of getting a project done, which I think if you take a step back, even from the AEC space, is super common as a project management professional, right? You are put in charge of the project. You're in charge of making sure it gets done on time, but you don't actually have direct reports. So you're instead relying on peer interactions and hopefully some trust to get things done. And you have a bit of authority as a project manager, but at the end of the day, they don't directly report to you. I was actually talking to someone a few weeks ago on this podcast about not only are many of them not some of them do have direct reports in that project specifically, but you're working across so many levels with so many stakeholders that you're often you're out there gaining this trust and confidence in people as you're building the ship.
Mm-hmm. I see the same thing. And to me, it kind of creates a bit of a complexity or a conundrum, only because it means that project managers have to rely on their personal power and influence in order to achieve success and to achieve the results that they need to achieve. And so that's just as a kind of a really interesting nuance to me when you think about project managers not having direct responsibility over people, but yet they are responsible for getting a project done through people. And so that creates, I think, a unique challenge for project managers. Like they're obviously technical masters, most of them coming from some sort of engineering position or architect position where they're very involved technically.
They're very good
And
at that.
yep,
That's why
been
they
there,
often
done
end
that.
up.
Yep. And so then they're promoted to this project manager role. And, they oftentimes don't have supervisory responsibility, but yet they're expected to complete these projects through people. And then the question is, how do you do that effectively? And I think based on my observation and my experience over the last 10 years working with project managers and senior leaders at firms, I've just observed that is kind of the crucial crossroads, if you will, where they really struggle making this transition. And I think as I've reflected on this problem, I think that there's some pretty clear indicators that could really help AEC firms to overcome some of these challenges and to embrace these challenges and to support project managers' development in a very tangible specific kind of way to start getting at that specific challenge of how do I effectively get work done through people without having direct supervisory responsibility of the people I'm asking to do work, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And I'll even elaborate a little further and say that a lot of firms we've interacted with and worked with, not only have they, you said promoted to project manager, a lot of them don't even have project manager positions or career paths, right? So it's like, okay, you're in charge of managing this project and you also have these other engineering projects that you're still doing. So now they're balancing that, and there's no clear, like, project management feels like the promotion and the reward, but where does it go next? And a lot of them don't really know. So there's this like, there's no hierarchy for it, which is tricky. You're trying to gain respect and authority through, your name as a project manager alone. And then you're also having to develop these skills at the same time. And a lot of them, if you're really lucky, you're at a great firm that, and these do exist, are out there mentoring you. You get to watch someone else do it. But then sometimes they're just like, you're really good at this engineering task. You should manage a project next time. And boom, here you go. Best of luck.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It creates, I think, a little bit of confusion for project managers. I mean, and I want to add another variable, which is like, there's the thing that they ought to do, right? Which is like, most oftentimes for people to promote and to move upward in their organization, it requires them to, in most cases, be responsible for people and projects. And that's a good thing, right?
Great thing.
That's not bad, right? That's good. I'm not saying that it's for everybody, but generally speaking, I think organizationally, it's good to reward people who are willing to be in a leadership role, whether that means leading a project or leading a person who's managing a project. And so I think then, every organization should strive for every single one of their employees to leadership, to inspire them to leadership. It's a worthy goal. And if that's the case for people out there, then I think then that creates a very specific problem worth considering, which is, how do we prepare our employees for leadership and managing projects? How do we train and prepare project engineers or architects to be effective project managers? And that's kind of what we've spent a lot of time thinking about that. And so we've got some interesting ideas to pose, and maybe just some theories to maybe create some thought on this particular topic.
Yeah, and I'm sure everyone's dying to hear. How do we do it, Collin? What are we
Okay.
doing?
Yeah. So just to kind of build a baseline, I am gonna probably share my screen here. For those of you who are not able to see, I'll try to do a good job of communicating these ideas without.
We're in luck because Colin's very good at communicating these ideas.
Well,
So
I
if
don't
you're
know about
not
that.
watching a screen right now and you're listening in your car, you'll be all right. Just listen carefully.
Perfect. Thank you, Fiona, for your vote of confidence.
All
Okay,
of it.
so I would just want to start by building a baseline understanding, perhaps kind of create a more holistic view of this idea of project managers, or any position for that matter, in any firm. We like to use the analogy of a tree to really depict this idea of growth and completeness. Of course, when you consider the image of a tree, oftentimes what we think about are what's visible, what's above the surface of the earth, right? The canopy, the trunk, the branches, the foliage, all of these beautiful characteristics of a tree. But what we oftentimes don't see are these very intricate and robust root systems that support sometimes these magnificent large trees, and they're being held by these amazing root systems. And so we like to use this idea to really kind of create a depiction of a holistic performance related to any position, especially project managers. So above the surface, right, we're able to see all these different kinds of what we call eligibility factors, which include things like your education, your experiences, your skills, your abilities, your knowledge, your certifications, all of these things that are very easily measured, that are I would say above the surface. And those things answer the question, can the project manager perform? right? Do they have the requisite knowledge, skills, ability, experience in order to do the work?
All those
Okay,
things that are easy to put on a resume.
that's right. Those things are easily identified on a resume. But what's a little more difficult to discern are the things that are below the surface, right? These are what we call suitability factors, and those really include those behaviors, those interpersonal skills, those leadership attributes that support a project manager in the act of actually completing a project. These are, the suitability factors answer the question: will the project manager be able to perform? Will they be engaged? Right? Will they be able to? Will they show discretionary effort on the job? And so, oftentimes, what we see is that firms do a great job of training project managers in the areas of eligibility factors, right? They're teaching the scientific process of project management, and that's very important. But oftentimes those kinds of trainings and development opportunities fail to recognize the importance of looking underneath the surface and considering, does this project manager have the ability to put into practice those behaviors that will influence others to achieve? And so it's really what I would want people to think about here is, are your leadership training programs or your project management training programs, are they addressing both things, right? And because if they're not, there's a chance that it could be creating an opportunity for you to further enrich the things that you're doing to have more impact and to prepare project managers for the job effectively. So with that in mind, I want to transition and talk a little bit about where are project managers on this on this adventure, that they're on, right? Starting, think about a project manager. Oftentimes, what it looks like is they went to school, they went to college, they get a degree in engineering or architecture. They go through the certification, they get licensed, and they go and they do great things for firms, and they succeed, and they become technical experts. And then at a certain point, somebody taps them on the shoulder and says, we'd like for you to manage this project. And, so what I would emphasize here to people is like, that is a significant deviation from the status quo, from what you've been asking this person to do for several years. All of a sudden, you're essentially, without knowing it, you're saying, I'm wanting you to do less of the technical, and now I want you to lead a project through your influence. And without having without having training and development, you're kind of, this might sound a little bit blunt, but you're kind of setting somebody up for failure if you have not prepared them to develop those behaviors that will prepare them for success. And so what I'm going to do is try to illustrate this idea to you by looking at this idea of maybe a project manager journey. So let me just kind of explain what you're looking at here. On the vertical axis, we have this scale of skill level required on the y-axis from low to high. And then on the x-axis, we have three very different positions that are often found in architect and engineering firms. And that starts with an engineer or an architect, moving into project manager, and then from there moving into like an office manager, or some people call it a business unit leader or a principal or a partner. Lots of different names and titles, but they're all getting at the same thing. So what you're talking about here as an engineer and architect is you're talking about being a technical leader, right? You lead technically. And then as a project manager, you're either leading people who are doing a project, or you're leading the project through your influence on your peers, which is a very difficult thing to do. And then once you master that project management position, then you move into a manager of the project managers, right? This can be managing an office or a business
Director,
or whatever it may be.
Program director.
Exactly. Yeah. And so what I think is really notable here is understanding that project management is like the intersection, is like it's the confluence of technical, interpersonal, and leadership skills. And so as an engineer, there's an expectation that they are highly skilled in the technical areas, and they are, right? And those technical skills really have a lot to do with personal achievement, like being very analytical, being self-motivated, being persistent, being organized, right? These are all technically oriented or achievement oriented skills. But when an engineer or an architect is promoted to a project manager, that becomes less important. And what becomes more important is their interpersonal skills and their leadership skills here. So what you can see is the interpersonal line, it suddenly becomes more important. And the leadership becomes even more important, right? And so it's kind of representing the intersection. This is you could think of this as a crucial crossroads or a key developmental role. They have to succeed here in order for them to progress to the next role. If they fail as a project manager, it really hurts their ability to succeed in future roles, right? Because as you can see, being an office manager or business leader or something like that, leadership skills becomes the most important thing, followed by interpersonal skills, and technical skills becomes the least important thing that they do. So I think that this image, what it does for me, and I think for others, is it really creates clarity about the importance of creating a development experience for project managers that emphasizes the significance of this transition, moving from technical expert into a project manager. So, what are your thoughts? I mean, what do you think?
I
Do you see the
actually,
same thing, or what are
yeah,
your
no,
reactions?
I totally agree. So I think one thing that's really important to remember, because we talk about this a lot, is, like, you get really good at those technical skills and then you're transferred into this, people management role essentially. But those technical skills, they sometimes it can sound like, oh, that's not as important anymore. They're super important. In order to manage someone doing those technical skills, you need to understand what it is they do in and day out, right? If you're in charge of managing a project, you need to know how long these things take, what's involved, who, like, you also have to know when somebody's like, "Oh, we can't do that." No, I kind of know you can because I have the experience of doing it. And you also have to know when someone's like, "We can do that," and you have to be like, "That seems kind of impossible because I've been doing that for however many years and it doesn't line up." So the technical skills become less important in your day to day, and you do have to let some of them go, which people struggle with because those feel good, they're familiar. But you have to release some of that to other people because you're now in charge of knowing the overall goals, getting those other technical professionals to an end goal. And like you said, the interpersonal skills, like that, it is really hard to manage a project if you don't know how to talk to people.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a whole lot of headache that you don't want to have. If it just comes, if it's as simple as, as a project manager, there's a lot of things that have to get done, but there's a way to do it that people want to join you in it. And like you said, a lot of people don't have authority over this group if in a hierarchy or if you're looking at a matrix of the organization, but are still responsible to get that project done by the end of the second quarter, right? So those interpersonal skills are going to get people to join you and join that bandwagon. So I totally agree that becomes, you needed less of it as a technical professional, and you have to build that up in order to be a strong project manager. And obviously the leadership skills skyrocket as you cross this path, right? All of these skills remain important. If you can't see the image, they're all important. They're not, none of them have dipped down to like low, not important at all. They just kind of change position on their level of importance in order for you to succeed in those roles.
Yeah.
And I would totally agree with that's what we see across the industry with our experience in the project management and leadership development training world.
Yeah. And I would just encourage those people who are involved in developing training and development programs and initiatives to really think about how can we set our project managers up for success by developing those interpersonal and leadership skills, emphasizing it with equal importance to mastery of those technical skills, because I think that's going to be the thing that really gets results for firms. Could show a potential huge impact on um, success.
Transform your technical experts into impactful leaders with EMI's Engineering Leadership Accelerator. Tailored for AEC professionals, this program enhances communication, delegation, and decision-making skills. Flexible, interactive, and designed to fit your team's schedule. Elevate your team's leadership capabilities today. Visit engineeringmanagementinstitute.org and click on corporate training.
Yeah, and also, how are we doing that before we're thrusting them into this project management role, right? How are they being mentored? How are they seeing good examples of it happening in front of them, so that they can learn from those? Because honestly, as a professional, that is most of the learning I've taken through my professional career is watching that person. That went really well. I'm going to steal those ideas and things with my brain and use them. And watching others and being like, that did not go well, and analyzing why it didn't go well.
Yeah.
So, it's a constant, like, you are in charge of your own success in a little bit in that way, but also how are firms supporting that? How are they making sure you're seeing those things and learning from them? What structures in place to train you on, like you said, the frameworks, and what structures are in place to teach you, what does leadership look like? Here are some keys and traits. I know we talk to engineers a lot, and just being like, being a good leader is not it. We want a formula. Tell me how I can be a good leader, which not all of it comes back to a formula, but give me some things I can work on and develop so that I can do better in this.
Well said. Yeah. Maybe I could introduce one other concept to maybe even provide a little more focus and show maybe some patterns that we've observed. I wanted to point towards a trend that we've seen, and just overlay this one idea with some behaviors that we've noticed over the years as it relates to project managers. And I want, the first thing I want to just quickly have you understand or take note of here is that this achievement or technical skills here that's on this chart, oftentimes what we see is in this middle column, which is the achievement oriented. This is how you get work done at your desk, so to speak. What we often find is that the action traits on the y-axis here, like analytical, self-motivated, persistent, and organized, engineers and project managers have mastered these traits. They always come into these are traits that they've learned and have been and are very successful at utilization of these behaviors in order to get work done. Oftentimes even they're good at being somewhat intuitive or managing stress or experimenting or being flexible. And so these are just natural skills that most engineers and architects and project managers have as a result of their education and experience on the job. They come into project manager positions having mastery of these behaviors, right? As indicated by the behavioral range being in this upper right-hand quadrant. But what we oftentimes also see is in this interpersonal column here, these are paradoxes that really have to do with how you relate to yourself and how do you relate to others. What we oftentimes find is that this interpersonal category of skill, project managers come into this position or are in the position with having very little skill at exercising these interpersonal skills. And what we oftentimes find is that the action behaviors on the y-axis here are very underdeveloped. Being confident in themselves, being accepting of who they are, right? Having to do with their presence on the job, communicating in a very straightforward, direct way, and being assertive are behaviors that we oftentimes see are substantially underdeveloped in project managers. And so it creates an opportunity for project managers to get an idea and to be introduced to a framework that will lead them to learning to master these behaviors that will help them develop interpersonal skills, which directly translates to their ability to be effective project managers and to lead projects through their influence. And so that's just been an interesting realization and clear pattern that we have observed for probably more than 8 years working with firms. I think it presents a clear opportunity to really think about how can we help project managers develop these other behaviors that really will contribute to their success. And at the same time, thinking about the leadership paradoxes and these leadership behaviors, learning to be comfortable with taking risk, learning to maintain accountability, learning to take authority for decisions and ownership of decisions, and then learning to really create a sort of a contagious environment for those people who they are influencing, to inspire them and motivate them to higher levels of achievement. So, anyways, it's just kind of an interesting pattern, like I mentioned before, that could really, I think, lead to different outcomes had project managers, should they have an opportunity to learn these other behavioral skills to contribute to their effectiveness. So, any thoughts or reactions to that?
I just want to caveat with this with if you're listening and not watching, Colin has mentioned a bunch of traits that are developable. I think that's the most important takeaway message from this whole thing is we all have these traits where we have not worked on them or we have worked on them a lot and they've contributed to our success. Every single thing he just mentioned is something that you can work on and develop over time. It's not, who you are and you're stuck here. So, and then anyone watching the screen, we just gave engineers a graph in front of them, which is a dangerous place to go because they want to know more about those graphs, I'm sure. And what Colin's looking at here is this paradox chart that relates back to a behaviors assessment. Do you want to give like a quick background, like a 3-sentence what that is, just so people have a little bit of orientation?
Sure. Yeah. This idea of a behaviors assessment is a way, basically, of helping project managers understand what are the behaviors that matter for project management. And as we were discussing earlier, is equipping project managers with the ability to start developing those things that are underneath the surface by looking at those behaviors that are required for success at varying levels of or positions that are oftentimes found in a firm.
Right. And the chart he's put up really can make people aware of what behaviors they should be working on so they can target their improvement.
Yeah, that's right.
I think this is so critical as far as people thinking about, growth is hard when you start talking about these softer skills. We call them soft skills. I don't really love that term, but that's what they are out there as. But, you've all mastered your technical skills. Otherwise, somebody would not have asked you to be a project manager. Simply like that. If you're not doing well in the technical, they're not going to ask you to manage the project. So it's so important that when you are working towards that project management, if that's something you want, or if you are in it, that you know which skills you need to improve on and which ones you're already really good at and can use and flex when needed. And I think that's the take-home message from all of this is just a constant growth cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
And I'll caveat this, Colin mentioned earlier, you want to make sure your trainings include, we're talking about project management training. There's a million different options out there for learning the structures, but taking it back and reflecting on how you personally need to work on those soft skills at the same time in order to do something like, how do you manage scope? Well, what interpersonal skills do I need to have? What achievement skills do I need to have in order to do that? Is a good way to reflect back and look at how you can personally grow so you can do better with those project management frameworks and skills.
I guess maybe I would just challenge you, Fiona, a little bit.
Yeah,
we
love
we
it.
we oftentimes hear that terminology used to describe leadership development and project management development, oftentimes putting it into the category of the soft skills, but we prefer to think of this as the hardest skills. So, because if you think about it, you have the soft skills and then you have the hard skills, right? But
Agreed.
the way we think about it is like the hard skills that they learn as being an engineer or an architect are very technical and they are difficult to master. But the hardest thing to do is to get work done through people. And so we've been trying to attempt intentionally use
Were
the
you
term
going to give me a new
hardest
term?
skills.
Hardest
Yes,
skills? Okay,
they're
I'm
the
in. I'm
hardest skills.
100% bought in, Colin. I hate the term soft skills because they
Yeah,
are not soft and they are very hard and
yeah,
people struggle with them, but that is colloquial.
it
Like
is.
that's what we've been calling them.
Yep.
But I think that hardest skills, I like that. I'm going to adopt it and I'm going to share it with everyone. You heard it here first. It's hardest skills.
There you go. Awesome. Cool.
So with that, to round us out, and I think you've hit on a lot of this, but if you could like distill it down to a few sentences,
Mhm.
if firm leaders are listening today and they could improve just one thing to strengthen project outcomes, where should they start?
my challenge to firm leaders would be to think holistically about project manager development, and to think of the role of project manager as not anything less than being a leadership position. Leadership, in our opinion, boils down to one word, which is influence. How do you have influence? And the way that we influence others is through our behavior, not our words, but instead our actions, what we actually do. And so I would challenge firm leaders to consider, how can we create and develop a holistic approach to project leadership, and to help project leaders to develop the hardest skills, which is leading through their influence. And there are great tools and resources out there to help project leaders to do this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Collin. Thank you for joining us today. This has been great. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to talking to you more about all things project management.
Well, Fiona, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aecpmpodcast.com. There you'll find a summary of key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your project management endeavors.